The writer of Alien was Dan O'Bannon. I mean, it says it right here on the screen. But the script he wrote, with help from Ron Shusett, was actually quite different than what we see in the final film. For one, in his version, the alien eggs were discovered in a strange pyramid that was constructed on the planetoid, instead of being stowed on the derelict ship. This was cut for budgetary reasons, but this script also had no mention of Ash or androids at all, Ripley being a woman, or practically any of the dialogue we hear in the movie. So what gives? Where did all this stuff come from, and why did O'Bannon get all the credit? Well, the answer to that question involves a huge battle over who was really responsible for the story we see on screen. This is a story of perhaps the best unintended collaboration that launched one of the biggest franchises in sci-fi.
Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility. I admire its purity.
I've never seen anything like it.
This episode is sponsored by Mubi, where you can stream exceptional films from around the globe. Try it free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description. When Ridley Scott first read the script for Alien, he was blown away by the quality. He knew that about 6 directors had already passed on it, though he couldn't see why. In an interview, Scott said, "One must never underestimate the quality of that script. Hill, Giger, O'Bannon, Shusett, whoever, had even put in enough characterization to make all of the characters interesting.
You're guaranteed by law to get a share.
What?
Why don't you just fuck off?
What?
Which I think is unusual in many thrillers, where characters are secondary. Characterization was in the attitudes, in the very Spartan choice of language, and what they talked about. But what Scott didn't know at the time was just how different the script he read was from its first version. The quote from this interview seems to suggest that he wasn't exactly sure who wrote the script, or even how many people were involved. This is likely because despite the fact that Dan O'Bannon and Ron Shusett have sole story credits in the movie, the script was rewritten multiple times by multiple people, and the question of who really made the Alien script unique was once hotly contested. One thing is for sure, if the first version of the script had been what was shot, it would have been a very different movie. Sort of. In the first episode, we talked about how Ridley Scott took a B-movie story and turned it into, well, Alien. But the idea of this approach, and hiring of Scott, originally came from Walter Hill, David Giler, and Gordon Carroll, who together made up Brandywine Productions. Producers are often thought of as just the money people, but many producers do have a big hand in the creative direction of their productions, and Hill and Giler have produced every installment in the Alien franchise to date, including the Alien vs. Predator movies, making them part of the Alien franchise more than anyone else. And Gordon Carroll was on the same track until his death in 2005. Sadly, David Giler died in 2020. He is still listed as a producer on the third prequel movie, but Brandywine would do the improbable in transforming a low-budget script into a big-budget blockbuster. It all started in 1976. Walter Hill was ruminating in his office at Fox Studios after lunch one day when a pal named Mark Haggard walked past his open window and handed him a script. Hill read it and passed it on to his colleague David Giler, telling Giler that the script was terrible, but it had one really great scene in it. Giler began reading it and agreed that it was, quote, absolutely terrible. This was on July 15, 1976. Hill was actually watching Jimmy Carter's speech accepting the Democratic nomination when Giler called him on the phone asking if he was nuts. Hill asked, "Well, did you come to the big scene?" And Giler responded, "Yeah, the thing jumps out and it's on his face." Hill said, "That's not it, keep reading." When Giler came to the chestburster, he called Hill back and said, "Well, I see what you mean." Hill was also intrigued by the alien's toxic blood and the problem of, how do you destroy a creature you can't kill without destroying your own life support system? It seems Hill and Giler were excited enough by these two features, especially the chestburster, that they decided to pursue the script despite what they saw as its junk pop elements. The script, of course, was Dan O'Bannon's original script for Alien, which he wrote in collaboration with Ron Shusett. Hill and Giler saw a raw potential in the script that, with the help of more experienced writers, could become something great. They wanted to use the script as a jumping off point, but they didn't know Dan O'Bannon yet or just how passionate he was about his work. Hill and Giler had formed Brandywine Productions in 1969 with a mutual friend named Gordon Carroll. As I understand it, Hill and Giler would pair their expertise in screenwriting with Carroll's expertise as a producer to fix up scripts and turn them into movies. You probably already know Walter Hill as the writer-director of movies like The Warriors and 48 Hours. Hill had gotten his start on shows like Gunsmoke and Bonanza before becoming the second assistant director on the Thomas Crown Affair in 1968. He sold some of his own screenplays in the early 70s, and by the mid-70s, he wrote and directed his first movie, a neo-noir called Hard Times. David Giler got his start as a TV writer, writing for shows like The Gallant Men and The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. His first produced feature film script was actually Maya Breckenridge, which is widely considered one of the worst movies ever made.
Wonderful. Strike that. Not me.
Long story short, the insane director did a terrible rewrite of the script's early drafts, and a 26-year-old Giler was hired to fix it. Giler finished an excellent script in about 3 weeks that even impressed the writer of the source novel. The producers ordered the director to stick to Giler's script, but of course, he didn't. After that fiasco, Giler wrote some unproduced scripts and did some rewriting, and in 1974, he was credited as the co-writer on The Parallax View. Gordon Carroll was around 20 years older than Hill and Giler. After serving in the Korean War and then working for an advertising company, Carroll went on to become executive producer on the 1965 movie How to Murder Your Wife. By the time he formed Brandywine Productions with Hill and Giler, he was already a seasoned line producer. Brandywine produced 2 movies before Alien, Women in Love in 1969.
The fig is a very secretive fruit. The Italians vulgarly say it stands for the female part, the fig fruit.
And The Student Body in 1976.
The local college has requested subjects for an experiment in human aggression and antisocial behavior.
Brandywine was operating a sort of indie arm within 20th Century Fox, with Hill and Giler having sold themselves to Fox as sort of script doctors, writers who could give a script some punch and get rid of all the filler. They would have a chance to deliver on this promise when Mark Haggard brought them the Alien script and suggested Hill direct it. While thinking the script was amateurish, Hill could see its potential. He later said he thought O'Bannon got in the way of his own script by pitching it as low budget. In an interview, Hill said, "One thing worth remembering is that Dan's screenplay had been making the rounds for quite a while and no one had bought it. Fox had seen it, and with Dan's original conception of a low-budget picture, they really weren't about to consider it. I originally read the script in the summer of 1976, and I saw qualities in it that the studios hadn't, in terms of the story itself. I presented it to my partners saying that if it were done on a sophisticated level, rather than as a low-budget picture along the lines of The Blob, we'd have a truly extraordinary film." This was in addition to the quality of the writing itself. Hill seemed to feel that the amateurish style of writing, perhaps more so than the content, got in the way of the studios taking it seriously, saying, "It had not even B-picture merit, that was its problem. Nobody could take it seriously. It wasn't a professional job, it was poorly written. But Brandywine wanted it." It took from July to October 1976 for them to hammer out a deal with O'Bannon and Shusett. Brandywine had a contract with Fox and hoped to finance it there. According to Gordon Carroll, Fox was initially hesitant about backing the production, but Brandywine assured them that they were going to rewrite the script. This assurance, coupled with Star Wars coming out and making sci-fi the hot genre during the negotiations, was what sold Fox on the idea. The timing of Star Wars' release was crucial in how Alien got picked up. Fox had been sure that Star Wars was going to fail, having gone way over budget, and before its success, Fox was not too keen on producing the Alien script. O'Bannon and Shusett almost sold the script to B-movie mogul Roger Corman, but the shift towards sci-fi made Shusett think that they could shop it around and see if they could get more money for it, which likely played a role in them agreeing to let Mark Haggard take a look at it before they signed with Corman. But they didn't know he was actually planning on pitching it to Brandywine. Enter another key player in Alien's story, then president of 20th Century Fox, Alan Ladd Jr. Ladd had been the one to greenlight Star Wars, and now he was looking for another sci-fi project to hopefully keep the trend going. Another source says that Ladd began to become interested in Alien after Steven Spielberg saw a rough cut of Star Wars and told him that it would be a smash hit. Ladd would also greenlight other sci-fi movies such as Blade Runner, making him a kind of champion of the genre at Fox. Ladd would also go on to greenlight Mel Brooks' Spaceballs. So he greenlit Star Wars, he greenlit Alien, and he greenlit Spaceballs. And now we have this.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal.
Ladd had apparently hired Brandywine specifically to come up with a darker space movie, something that married sci-fi and horror. Hill and Giler knew how to talk to executives, so they brought the script to Ladd, and it was Hill who made the argument that if they took the idea of the script and punched it up, they could fool the audience into thinking it was an A-level movie. Ladd liked the premise, saying that parts of it reminded him of what scared him about Psycho, that it didn't rely too heavily on gore, but works more on the mind. Hill said, "This was a B movie by its nature. You had to make it better. We could do that. That was our deal, we made things better." Brandywine and Ladd agreed that the approach to the story rather than the premise itself was what would make the film special. Ladd signed off on a $10 million budget, with the condition that Hill and Giler would make the movie look like a blockbuster, not a Corman movie. Brandywine was able to option the script for only $1,000 because they agreed to allow O'Bannon to, quote, hang around during production as part of his contract. This would seem to be just the beginning of conflicts between the Brandywine team and the original writers, O'Bannon and Shusett. O'Bannon would also negotiate for a secondary role as a visual effects consultant on the movie. The option gave Brandywine exclusive development rights for 6 months, and when they exercised the option, O'Bannon got another $20,000, Shusett got $15,000, and if the movie got greenlit, O'Bannon and Shusett would receive up to $150,000, and Shusett would receive an executive producer credit. Gordon Carroll signed the check saying, "I can think of no Brandywine checks that have given me more pleasure to sign." O'Bannon said, "It was a real surprise because it was the first time in my life I had ever had an option exercised. I'd sold many options, but I'd always have them revert. I had never had them fork over the cash on the barrelhead, wham, landslide, cash. It came just in time to pay my medical expenses." Despite all the perks of his contract, it seems that O'Bannon was kept in the dark about the changes being made to his and Shusett's script. O'Bannon claimed not to be aware until after principal photography was finished that the script had been rewritten. O'Bannon recalled being in Gordon Carroll's office and seeing a script on his desk titled Alien by Walter Hill. He asked Carroll about it and was told that he wasn't supposed to see that. A key difference of opinion between Brandywine and the writers was that Brandywine saw their lack of background in science fiction as an asset that would give the project more polish, while O'Bannon saw this as a drawback.
Since when is that standard procedure?
According to Gordon Carroll, Hill and Giler started on rewrites immediately, doing several drafts. In Carroll's eyes, they didn't change the essential spine of the story, but changed the character of it entirely. Some of the changes Hill and Giler made, according to them, included a complete rewrite of all the dialogue, making 2 of the characters female and the whole crew working class, adding Ash and the robot subplot, which sounds like a cool band name, and generally giving more texture and depth to the characters. The O'Bannon-Shusett version apparently still contained the crew nabbing the space jockey's skull, which was referred to as Poor Urich, and which the Brandywine writers chose to cut. Hill also borrowed the idea of a sentient ship computer from Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, which would be called Mother, though not everything from Hill's rewrite made it into the final film. Mother was originally written as a, quote, boozy, no-boundaries personality that would serve as another antagonist for Ripley. He also added a sex scene between Dallas and Parker, and one between Ripley and Ash. Dallas was also going to be the victim of the chestburster before it was changed to Kane. The idea was that it would seem like he was the main character and then die early on. Ripley was also going to dismantle Mother like in 2001, but more viscerally.
Oh my God, oh God, no!
One source claims that by the time Hill and Giler were finished with their version, it only retained about 30% of O'Bannon's version. According to Hill, it was his and Giler's reworked script that got Fox to invest $10 million in it. Of course, O'Bannon and Shusett dispute a lot of this. It's worth mentioning that in their version they actually meant the characters to be non-gendered, not all male, to allow for more casting possibilities, though they admitted that it never occurred to them that the lead could be a woman.
We realized that studios might resist it. Even though we went to Corman first, we thought that Fox might not make the movie unless we managed to make it as commercial as possible. So we had a little asterisk. Please note, any one of the crew members, or let's say 2, could be females if you want to have it go for a wider, broader appeal. But to all truth, we did not in any way remotely conceive the idea that the lead, Ripley, would be a woman.
Producer Ira Powell, who came onto the movie when Ridley Scott was hired, agreed that Hill and Giler were the ones who came up with the idea of Ripley being a woman as part of their Truckers in Space slant on the story. According to Giler, this decision was made mainly for cynical reasons. At the time, Fox had been making a lot of so-called women's movies, and they hoped having a female lead might help sell Fox on the script. Plus, Hill and Giler felt that the lead was too boring, and they were looking for a way to make the character stand out. Hill changed the name of Martin Robbie in O'Bannon's script to Ripley, after Ripley's Believe It or Not. Ladd was also sold on the idea of having the lead be a woman from Tippi Hedren in Hitchcock's monster movie, The Birds. Shusett said that most people thought the script was getting worse, not better, with the rewrites, because science fiction was simply not Hill or Giler's forte. O'Bannon claimed that all they did was tweak arbitrary things like names in an attempt to get writing credits. O'Bannon felt that the only reason for the rewrites in the first place was that Brandywine wanted an excuse to give themselves all of the credit, and him none. Shusett, however, did say that he loved the addition of Ash. The issue of who really wrote the script that was shot eventually resulted in a Writers Guild Association arbitration to determine who would be credited on screen.
Well, you get what you contracted for like everybody else.
Yes, but everybody else gets more than us.
There are a couple of versions of how the arbitration came about. According to one source, it was Fox that suggested to the Guild that Hill and Giler get screenplay credits, while O'Bannon got a story by credit, and such a request automatically triggered an arbitration per the Guild's rules. Another source implies that Hill and Giler were set to receive writing credits, and it was O'Bannon who brought the issue to the WGA in an effort to have their names dropped. Ultimately, this was successful, and O'Bannon received sole screenwriting credit despite Hill and Giler's contributions. At least part of the reason for the Guild's ruling was apparently based on a technicality. If they had been hired as writers to rework the script, they would only have needed to have contributed around 30% of the film material to have earned co-writer credits. But because they were officially producers of the movie, and because they wrote as a team, they were required to have contributed around 70% of the film material to qualify for any credit at all. And as Hill later said, the actual amount that a specific person contributes to a script is very hard to quantify. Hill said that there were no hard feelings against O'Bannon following the WGA's ruling, though he added that he thought it would have been more accurate if he and Giler had received co-writer credits in addition to O'Bannon's. That said, there seemed to have been some ongoing tension between O'Bannon and Brandywine. Giler complained that in addition to being allowed on set, O'Bannon wanted every credit in the book, even though he didn't change a thing while he was on set, and implied that O'Bannon's visual design consultant credit was essentially given just to placate him. Hill also implied that O'Bannon's design title was made up, and even suggested he thought that O'Bannon had exaggerated his hand in Dark Star as well. Giler later gave a somewhat contradictory statement about O'Bannon, saying he was only out for himself, before continuing, "There's no feud. O'Bannon's a guy trying to make a buck. He's capitalizing on the whole thing as much as he can. I can understand that. But we haven't been fighting or arguing over the phone or anything like that. We bought his script a couple years ago. That was the end of my association with him." In contrast, O'Bannon had a very positive relationship with Ridley Scott. Scott said of O'Bannon, "He's great, a really sweet guy, and I was soon to realize, a real science fiction freak." Ron Cobb, O'Bannon's longtime collaborator, obviously agreed and emphasized that Scott respected O'Bannon, though he acknowledged how O'Bannon could push people's buttons.
I guess the only unconventional thing was that Dan was always there, going from drawing to drawing, and he was really shepherding this thing, and I don't know that they were used to that, because Dan meddled a lot, anybody really cared about the movie, and it was Ridley that gave him the license to do it, because Ridley liked Dan's advice and his input, and so the writer, Ron Shusett was there as well. So the writers had quite a presence on the picture, even though Walter Hill and David Giler wrote another version of the movie.
The bottom line is that movies are collaborative efforts, and Alien simply wouldn't have been what it was without O'Bannon's story on the one hand, and the ideas of Shusett, as well as Hill and Giler's rewrite. O'Bannon had the concepts and the sci-fi savvy, while Hill and Giler had the sophistication and experience to give those concepts the treatment they deserved. By the time the movie was released, Giler confirmed that he and Hill were already talking about a sequel. What's funny is Sigourney Weaver said at the time that she didn't think a sequel would happen, saying, "I don't know how the scriptwriters could get Ripley back in space. I really don't. But there's that planet still sitting around there, full of alien eggs." Of course, they did manage to get Ripley, quote-unquote, back into space, and this time, Hill and Giler received story-by credits along with director James Cameron, and the rest is history. For this episode's after show, I made a bonus video taking you through Dan O'Bannon's script to see what it would have been like if they hadn't rewritten it. It's interesting how similar and yet how different it is. It's available right now on Patreon for $1, and it'll go into the $5 archive when my next video goes up. Have you seen Park Chan-wook's new movie, Decision to Leave? Well, you can watch it right now with this episode's sponsor, Mubi. Mubi is a place to discover incredible cinema, where every film on the platform is handpicked by their team of curators. Mubi features everything from retrospectives and curated film programs to exclusives and never-before-streamed film premieres. You can log in from anywhere, and it's like you've arrived at your own personal film festival. They even have a print magazine called Notebook, with tons of great contributors and retro finds. You can learn more about Notebook at Mubi.com/magazine. Along with exclusively hosting Park Chan-wook's Decision to Leave, Mubi is also streaming 3 of his other movies, Judgment, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, and Lady Vengeance. And starting in December, you can also watch Nicholas Winding Refn's insane Pusher trilogy that made Mads Mikkelsen a star. All of this and much, much more are available right now on Mubi. Try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/CinemaTyler. That's mubi.com/CinemaTyler for a whole month of great cinema for free. Or join CinemaTyler on Patreon at the $5 level and get extended access to Mubi as a perk.